Where do I even begin with this? I don't really know. There's a lot of detail to cover, so let's just get straight into it. It's gonna get mad. Okay, so it makes sense to start at the original headline. The world's most expensive Omega, sold by famed auctioneer Oral Bax in November 2021 at a Philips auction. It was a Speedmaster, reportedly a very rare and important example, and so, although the estimate was in the early hundreds of thousands, it sold for $3.4 million. Pretty impressive. Philips and Bax have a reputation for hosting some of the biggest and best watchmaking auctions in the world, including the legendary $18 million sale of the Rolex Daytona Paul Newman, owned and worn by the actor himself. But a few days after the sale, an individual who goes by the alias Periscope, who's made a name for himself investigating the goings-on of the auction world, received some troubling pictures. They were of an Omega Speedmaster, albeit a more recent model, that featured the same dial as the watch that had just sold for $3.4 million. The exact same dial. The blemishes on the dial were identical, but there had also been some changes. The auction watch was supposedly much older, and so the colour of the luminous paint had been changed to match the respective era. Everything else in the watch was different. Hands, case, bracelet movement, again sourced to match the correct era. This is what's known as a Frankenwatch. Usually a watch goes through parts replacement because of wear and tear or damage, and so long as those parts are authentic, their originality isn't too much of a concern. But for a vintage watch, the originality and therefore rarity can have an enormous effect on price. Periscope published these findings in April 2023, which you can check out via the link in the description below. There's a lot there about this and other examples. Take a browse and see what you think. Periscope also brought the situation to the attention of Philips. It's not the first time he's told Philips about stuff like this. In 2018, he told Philips about a Rolex 6239 they'd sold, which was a watch from a previous auction, doctored to be worth more. Philips acknowledged the watch was inauthentic and publicly apologized. Now this has all broken into the mainstream media, Philips have made a statement acknowledging that the watch is indeed a Frankenwatch, but denying any knowledge of it prior. They said, nobody had ever suggested this Omega watch was not authentic. The watch was inspected by specialists, experts, and even the manufacturer at the time of the sale, and nobody raised any concerns over it. Periscope also brought the situation to the attention of Philips. Philips also said, we do not offer watches unless we are 100% satisfied about their authenticity. Philips has built a reputation for the highest level, industry-leading due diligence process, holding itself to the highest standards in authenticity research. Philips prides itself on carrying out thorough and detailed checks on all watches which are submitted to ensure that we only offer for sale watches which we are satisfied are authentic in every single aspect, and that every single part is authentic. This means the watch and all its parts must be made at the time the watch was created by the original manufacturer. In the case of this Omega, it was sold with an extract from the Omega archives, but not an Omega certificate of authenticity, holding itself to the highest standards in authenticity research. It seems if any watch deserved an official Omega certificate of authenticity, it's this one. It also states in Philips' conditions of sale, the knowledge of Philips in relation to each lot is partially dependent on information provided to us by the seller, and Philips is not able to and does not carry out exhaustive due diligence on each lot. Philips has built a reputation for the highest level, industry-leading due diligence process. So Philips say they didn't know, but Omega has admitted that they did. In a statement, Omega said, as it stands at present, there are 3 former employees who have admitted to the run of events when confronted during an Omega internal investigation, which is active and ongoing. Omega is bringing criminal charges against all involved. One of those employees was former head of brand heritage, Petros Protopapas, who led the Omega Museum and Archives department with a team of experts and a watchmaker. It so turns out the previously undisclosed buyer of the watch was indeed Omega, convinced by Petros that it would be an important addition to the heritage collection and the museum, which is open to the public. Typically, when a watch brand seeks to buy a watch at auction for its heritage collection, it makes itself known in the room. In this case, the winning bidder was identified as an intermediary based in China, but not before, as Omega states, a highly inflated bid made through the intermediaries, which allowed those involved to collect and distribute the profits generated from the sale. So what Omega is saying in a nutshell is that the head of the Omega Museum sought permission to buy a Franken watch he'd colluded on, and was given a budget on a lot estimated in the early hundreds of thousands for $3.4 million for a watch they'd not issued a certificate of authenticity on or got a second opinion on, which was then artificially inflated at auction by carefully placed actors. A watch that Petros would then have to look at on display every day at his place of work. But the watch was purchased in 2021, and there's been no mention of it entering the collection or being in display at the museum. I don't imagine Omega knowingly paid $3.4 million on a watch it had the opportunity to authenticate in advance of the sale, and didn't, only to keep it private whilst authenticating it after the sale. So if Omega discovered this issue before the story broke, in time to identify evidence and remove the individuals involved, how did it come to learn about it? Was it through the Periscope report? And why didn't it make any mention of it, at least to Phillips? There's another interesting line in Omega's statement. The watch is an assembly of mostly authentic Omega components. Mostly authentic, as in some are fake. To ensure that we only offer for sale watches which we are satisfied are authentic in every single aspect, and that every single part is authentic. Maybe Omega should have asked whoever spotted those fake parts since about the watch before they bought it. The thing is, if this had all gone under the radar, a record price for an Omega Speedmaster at auction would have been very good for Omega. It's clear from activities like the Moonswatch that Omega's keen to get its name out there. And in this case, both Omega and Phillips have been very quick to admit how easily they were duped. They're holding their hands up and saying between them they bought and sold something they should have known better about, something the internet managed to uncover mere days after the auction. Admitting such a thing so freely could have serious consequences for the reputations of both businesses. Phillips is keen to state, however, that we have examined our records and cannot identify a single instance where a watch has been returned to us because the watch was deemed inauthentic. Phillips acknowledged the watch was inauthentic and publicly apologised. So there you have it, the story so far. $3.4 million, a dodgy Speedmaster, a mastermind criminal and two befuddled businesses considered the experts on these things, caught with their pants down. What do you think about it? Let me know down in the comments below. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? Like, think about the Paul Newman.